Today, we welcome a very special guest to Sauna Talk, Dr. Charles Raison. His biography is as follows. Dr. Raison is the Mary Sue and Mike Shannon Chair for Healthy Minds, Children, and Families in the School of Human Ecology and a professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Raison received his medical degree from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, where he was elected to Alpha Omega Alpha and won the Missouri State Medical Association Award. He completed residency training at the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute and Hospital in Los Angeles. In addition to his medical training, Dr. Raison obtained his Master's of English from the University of Denver. Dr. Raison has written and published over 100 scientific papers as well as over 20 review papers and editorials. Chapters he has written have been featured in over 30 books, and he has written 2 books, most recently, The New Mind-Body Science of Depression, published by WW Norton in 2017. Dr. Raison's publications have been cited over 14,000 times, with 3 publications having more than 1,000 citations. His H-index is 44. The recipient of several teaching awards, Dr. Raison has received research funding from the National Institute of Mental Health, the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. His visionary work focuses on the treatment of depression in response to illness and stress, translating neurobiological findings into novel interventions. In addition to his activities at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Dr. Raison is the mental health expert for CNN.com. Some experts from our chat. We discussed Charles's academic and personal background, how he has been interested in the world's ancient practices, including Buddhist Tummo meditation, where Tibetan monks are wrapped in cold, wet blankets and through breathing and meditation are able to warm themselves for a long period of time. The area around research and studies to treat depression are of special interest. Reaching a hypothermia state has proven health benefits. Dr. Raison's 2010 depression study with 16 people who reached 101.3 degrees Fahrenheit shown a remarkable decrease in depression. The participants actually lowered their internal body temperature through the study. We discuss other work and studies happening right now in the United States through Harvard University and Massachusetts General. Also, Ashley Mason's work in San Francisco, and more on this soon. The Vail Sauna Lab in Eagle County, Colorado is an interesting place. The disparity of, Eagle County is a really interesting place on its own. The disparity of rich and poor and people moving there and experiencing the paradox of paradise. These are likely culprits that lead to the area having the highest suicide rate in the country. So, we're going to talk about transforming mental health, and the good news is in this county, in Vail, there's a private investment of $100 million towards a new hospital that is committed to transform mental health in this country, providing equitable care for rich and non-rich, integrating mind-body practices. Vail Health is set to be a world-class research institute. Heat, thermal studies, psychedelic research are all focus areas. It is an exciting time for sauna research. We talk about the chill study. Can you benefit from heat whether you are taking an antidepressant or not? This episode teased the ball up for our follow-up conversation, which I will be equally excited to bring you in the near future. So, for right now, I'm pleased to present to you Dr. Charles Raison. This show is brought to you by the Build Your Own Sauna ebook from saunatimes.com. Be it indoor electric, backyard wood-fired, or some combination in between, this is a practical guide that has helped hundreds, more likely thousands of would-be sauna enthusiasts as they realize their own authentic sauna dreams. With this easy-to-follow guide, we can settle into what's best for the individual. This book was written for you. As many of us know, the sauna building journey is often as rewarding as the destination. And as you talk with others, you'll find that this is the guide that can cut through a lot of the pedantic chatter and help you, just like with good heat, get right to the bones of sauna goodness. Interested? Please go to saunatimes.com and click the page at the top called ebook for more information. As bonus, for the month of August 2023, 50% of all book sales are being donated to Sauna Aid. Now, on to the show. Well, greetings, everybody. I'm super pleased to bring to this podcast Dr. Charles Raison. And Charles, if you could, where are you located right now? And tell us about your day, like a typical day for you.
Yeah, well, so I'm located in Madison, Wisconsin, because I am a professor in the Department of Psychiatry. That's my primary thing I do. I have a number of consulting type work that I do around the country, but I'm sitting in my house because oddly, despite having said I'm in the Department of Psychiatry, they haven't got me an office yet. There's a long story there. So I do most of my work at home. It's a beautiful morning here in Wisconsin. Sun's out, leaves are changing, cold. So my day is mostly meetings and then trying to write things when I'm not in meetings. I meetings are the bane of my life. I don't really generally enjoy them, but you get to a certain point in life, and Zoom has made this possible. But it's interesting. Zoom does other things. So the first thing I did this morning at 7:30 was I got on and taught an undergraduate class at for Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, which I couldn't do, of course, without Zoom. Twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday mornings. My colleague, Dr. Don Noble, and I teach a class on ancient practices, which include heat, hyperthermia, which we're talking about today. So that's pretty much my day. Every once in a while, I sneak off and do something good. I have a buddy who's one of the world's great cancer researchers. I talked to him for an hour this morning. It's interesting how research across fields, there's a lot in common. He and I do at a very high level. Some of the thinking is very similar. So, and then, I the other thing I do a lot of is working in the realm of psychedelics. Basically, I've spent the last, I don't know, probably 10, 12 years, 15 years trying to develop and test new treatments for depression, with the new treatments actually being old things like psychedelics, heat, things like that. And Madison, Wisconsin is really a world center for psychedelic research. And tonight I'm going out to, we have a symposium today and tomorrow. And one of the hats I wear is I serve as the director of clinical and translational research for USONA Institute, which is a very novel, remarkable entity. It's a nonprofit drug company, basically. And we've built this stupendous new building. It's just unbelievably beautiful, specifically for psychedelic research. So I'm going out there tonight to mingle with some of the world's great, psychedelic researchers. So I do a lot of stuff in a day. The bad news is I do too many things. The good news is that most of them are pretty interesting.
Yeah, fabulous. For listeners, could you give us your background? Where did you grow up? What was your study? Through your academic studies, and then how did in your pathway? Just because you shared with me before, and I just thought it was so fascinating, and appreciate that if you could
Sure.
give that framework.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting. It shows how sometimes science will lead you on these interesting routes that are more imaginative than what you'd think of. I grew up in a very small farming town near Fresno, California, so out in the kind of grapes of wrath country, the part of California that is not like what people think of when they think of California. It's very conservative. It's very poor, very flat. It's where most of the fruit in our country comes from. I grew up in a small town. My family had owned a newspaper there for about 100 years. I when I graduated high school, I went to Stanford. And I was an anthropology major, which has served me very well over the years. It's really interesting. That's given me a perspective on a lot of the things I'm interested in. I came from a family of journalists, so first job I had out of college was I was a print journalist down in Texas for a while. A long story for how I got there. But then I always thought I was going to be a novelist. So I went to the University of Denver to do a creative writing PhD, and I discovered I really didn't have what it takes to be a novelist. And so I was really kind of at a crossroads in 1984. I had a relationship that was coming apart, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And I had this. It's interesting. I had this sort of epiphany. I literally on U.S. Highway 59 between Falfurrias and Corpus Christi, Texas. I said I'm going to be a psychiatrist because I'd been interested, of course, in things like psychiatry, but I have a blood phobia, and I had to get into my mid-20s before I kind of realized I could probably overcome it. So it took a while. I had to go back and take science classes, but eventually I went to medical school at Washington University in St. Louis just to be a psychiatrist. And I stuck with it. And then when I was done with that, I was homesick for the West. So I came back out to UCLA, which in those years was an especially good residency program, and trained up to be a psychiatrist, and then stayed on as a faculty member, doing almost entirely clinical work. I ran the psychiatric emergency room, and I did a lot of inpatient work, very, very mentally ill people. I really specialized in people that were, grossly psychotic, really, really sick mental illness. I wanted to be a researcher, and I couldn't figure out how to do it, and I wasn't really getting any support at UCLA. And then I was in my now by my now kind of my mid-30s in kind of an early midlife crisis, and I got really interested in Buddhism. I never became a Buddhist, but I started meditating a little bit, and I'm not much of a meditator either. But because of that, I had this chance thing happen where I ended up meeting the Dalai Lama's sister and hosting this giant fundraising dinner for her at UCLA. And because I got to know her pretty well, she introduced me to a couple of Tibetan Buddhist monks that were these sort of brilliant, brilliant guys. And one in particular, Lobsang Rabge, was at UCLA, unbeknownst to me. I brought him onto my team. And so for a year, every week, every Monday night, he and I would meet for a couple of hours at the Panda Inn, which is the kind of the grandfather of Panda Express restaurants. And he taught me a great deal about Tibetan Buddhism. But the thing he taught me some of their tantric perspectives, one of which is that if you want to develop very, very stable mental states that are really necessary if you're trying to chase enlightenment quickly, that you really want to harness bodily processes. And the bodily process that he talked most about was the ability to generate body heat. So it turns out that, and this is better known now than it was back in the 90s when this was really esoteric stuff. All the very advanced Tibetan Buddhist practices, the tantric meditation, the tantric Buddhist practice, are based on this practice called tumo. And tumo is this odd technique where you combine some very, very strange, vigorous breathing activities with a very specific meditation of visualizing the flame here at your belly button. And a guy named Herb Benson, was a famous early guy in mind-body medicine, had actually gone to India and studied them and filmed them because the tumo, what they had been reported to do, and which he showed in a film that they do is the monks train, and then to see whether they've mastered a technique or not, they take them out on a freezing cold night, strip them down into their underpants, and then take these sheets, dip them in freezing water, and then wrap the sheets around the monk's shoulders, and they see how many sheets the monks can dry on their body, basically without shivering, right? And they do that because this practice is famous for producing ecstatic states of mind. And it was so weird. I don't know what, it's just this was one of these strange things. I became obsessed with this. I became absolutely convinced that these guys must be doing something physical that we could understand in Western science. And that if we could understand what they were doing, we could understand how you might be able to harness bodily processes to, treat depression, right? You induce these really positive moods. So I set out, I became hell bent on studying tumo. And I mean, I just, for about 2 years, this is literally all I did. I used to travel around with a suitcase full of papers, and UCLA was a non-starter. There was no way I could do it there. So I started looking around the country to figure out where could I study tumo. And at that time, Emory University in Atlanta had just started what has become, I think, probably the world's premier program in Tibetan Buddhist Western interactions. Dalai Lama became a faculty member there, and they had a very robust program in mind-body medicine and psychiatry. They were studying the immune system. So I packed up, I got a job, I came to Emory, And I had a couple of lucky breaks, and I ended up becoming this researcher that studied especially like the immune system in the brain. And because I was trying to understand what are bodily processes that affect mood. I was never able to study this Tumo meditation though. It's really interesting. The thing that got me in the door, I
Yeah.
never studied. The monks would not let themselves be studied in those
Mhm.
years. So I became this researcher. We did other meditation studies. There, the issue sat. But between about 2002 and 2010, I became increasingly successful as a researcher because we kind of got into the ground floor of this business about inflammation. You hear a lot about inflammation now. This was just beginning. I figured my days of body temperature were over. But then in about 2010, I started episodically teaching in this psychoneuroimmunology program in Austria. I knew somebody, it's a long story, but as I was teaching, there were a couple of students there who said, we are as interested in body temperature as you are. And one of them worked at a psychiatric hospital, and he found a hyperthermia, a heat machine in the basement. They in Europe they use high heat to treat cancer a lot. And he said, he was an engineer. He said, I'm going to rebuild it. Let's do a study. We think that let's stick depressed people in a heat machine, cook them, and see what happens. And I was like, man, that sounds interesting. So we did this small, just we call it an open trial. We took 16 people. They were all hospitalized for depression. We measured their body temperature for 24 hours before we stuck them in the heat machine, and we measured their depressive symptoms. Then we cooked them up to an average of 101.3 Fahrenheit or 38.5 centigrade. And then we measured their body temperature and their depression a week later. And it was really quite striking. So the as a group, their depression scores improved tremendously. And interestingly, and this is really important, so we heated these people hot. They're it's like a sauna, maximal sauna, right? But what it did long term to their body temperature was it actually lowered it considerably. So people that spend time in saunas, what they're actually doing is inducing a hypothermic state.
Mhm.
And that's probably good for our health, mental and physical. And the more their body temperature dropped, the more undepressed they got. So this was really, it's a little bitty study, but it was quite interesting. And so then we got funding. I moved to Arizona. I pulled in one of the European guys to come with me to Arizona. And we did a larger, still not a large study, but we did a better study where we had a comparator condition, a very believable, we call it a sham condition. We showed the same thing. Hyperthermia, you can take people with depression, you put them in a machine, you heat them up to 101.3, and not everybody responds. Some people will have a huge response. Most people will have a middle response. But as a group, wow, it's really an effect. And it's definitely the heat. It's not, almost everybody who got the fake treatment thought they got the real treatment. So we know it's not that it wasn't just belief and hope. So there you go. So then, right. So all of a sudden, we have this really interesting data. Then I moved to Wisconsin, and I tried to get started up here and ran into all sorts of problems. So I was like, well, that's it. I'm done with heat again. And just when I did that, I got a call from this wonderful group of people at Harvard, at Mass General, who are obsessed with hot yoga. David Michelin, Marin Nair, Simi Foster. And I said, you can have just take it. I'm done with heat.
Mhm.
And but they said, well, okay, thank you, but we meet with us every week. That's been going on for like 8 years now. And so over time, and then I had a graduate student I worked with in Arizona named Ashley Mason, brilliant young researcher at UCSF, who is remarkably, I know you're getting ready to talk to her. She is, in my opinion, the world leader at this point in hyperthermia. It really is the focus of her entire research career. Brilliant woman. So we all started hanging out together. And Ashley's done a couple of studies that again are beginning to replicate that heat has an antidepressant effect. So that's who's talking to you today. It's really interesting. I got out of the heat business like 3 times.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. And there's so many things to unpack with your story. And thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
It's a wonderful journey. And like, we never step in the same river twice. And as I say, the river never seems to run straight, does it? With all these twists
No, it
and turns.
does not. No.
Can we bring things forward to? I mean, we're bringing things somewhat to the present, is it a fair time to talk about the future, or is there
Yes.
another area within, because I would like to unpack heat, being a sauna nut, for 30
Yes.
years and whatever. And I do want to touch upon one thing about bringing the internal body temperature to 101.3. And I just have to do a call out to that and talk about the
Yes.
spectrum of sauna specifically. And, the cliche is if you go to a health club sauna with like, a heater with like 12 rocks in there with a big sign, don't throw water on the rocks and stuff. You could sit in this, what I call microclimate for quite a time, and your ears will get really hot. And then we never really get our core hot, right? But we're getting uncomfortable because perhaps of lack of ventilation and these limiting factors. But I think the convergence here really quickly is that creating awesomely resonating microclimates with good sauna will help sauna bathers, in the study group, get to that magic state, like, full body heat. Do you agree with that or have some
I
comments?
do agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. And so one of the things that we do in our studies that's different than what people tend to do in a sauna is we use devices where the head sticks out.
Yep.
So for instance, in the studies that I did that we talk about, we had this, $50,000. It's called the Heckle HT3000. It's a specific hyperthermia machine that uses these big infrared lights with the idea that it heats you up more comfortably because it's a tent and you lay in a tent and your head sticks out, but the temperature in a tent never gets above like 130, 140. So it's more comfortable that way. And then we actually, to help people get to that temperature, we would put a cold compress on their
Mhm.
forehead
Mhm.
repeatedly. There's somebody with them the whole time because 101.3 is really, it's pretty hot, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things that Ashley did that was so important was, this very expensive medical device made in Germany. Trying to get it approved in the USA is an impossible task, given that you'd need to have a whole drug company trying to develop something like that. So Ashley began doing the studies we do in commercially available, non-regulated FDA domes, but your head sticks out, and she kind of mimics our thing, and she gets people up to 101.3. Not everybody can get that hot, but yeah, she's shown an antidepressant response. So Glenn, you are absolutely right that anything you can do to get your core up. And the other thing is that in these devices, it takes people anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half to get there.
Mhm.
So this is not the level of heat that we are using for a treatment is not something people would do every day, right? Um, but one of the interesting things in our study was we looked at the relationship between how hot did you get in our device and how much undepressed did you get. And it's not anywhere near 1 to 1, but it's clear that in general, the hotter you got, the less depressed you were for 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. But it's a spectrum. So if you got up a little bit, even, you're likely to feel better, right? So what I tell people is that we're doing the big gun business in our research, but if you're somebody who finds that more modest sauna exposure uh, makes you feel better, I'm here to tell you, yeah, you're right, and there's biological reasons for it, and you should honor it because it's a true finding.
Mhm.
And then we have to caution people that you know getting heat stroke is a very serious problem, right? And so I always tell people, now listen, man, if you're serious about trying to replicate a little bit of what we've done, the reliable way is rectal core body temperature. Buy yourself the kind of thermometer you used to put in your kids' butts, and kind of suck it up and see what it feels like to get up around 101, 101.3, so that you know what you're doing. And because the hyperthermia literature where they use like these machines for cancer patients, once you get above 101.3, there's a fairly rapid increase in adverse events. Higher temperatures can be really dangerous, beneficial sometimes for cancer, but dangerous. And so I always feel like I have to add that cautionary note that don't go chasing a higher temperature without monitoring what you're doing.
Right. And subject for a follow up for us, as well as Ashley, is the discussion and the testing of a sauna microclimate that is most advantageous to the sauna bather, such that the entire core is heated, as we referenced, and we talk about the holy trinity of good sauna, which is heat, steam, and ventilation, and each of those, any of those three, can constrain the sauna bather toward reaching that state that we're gunning for, we're shooting for. So I could nerd out with you on that for quite a bit, but but what I would love to do, if it's okay, unless you have a comment to that.
No, that's
Yeah,
absolutely
good.
going.
I'm real excited to share with listeners to the Sauna Talk podcast what's next, and I would like for you to frame up what is next for you individually and personally, as well as the Veil Project. If we could dive right into that.
Sure. So, it's very interesting how this is these new treatments. The same thing is true for psychedelics. You find out, you take something that's old, you do it in a controlled setting. You see that if you take it and do it once, people feel better for weeks afterwards. You go, wow, darn, that's wow. We've got a new antidepressant modality, old new antidepressant modality, but then 1,000 questions immediately come up, right? So there's a bunch of questions that we don't know about the equivalent of sauna, hyperthermia for, let's say, depression, since that's what we're talking about. So one of the things we don't know is, how does it work, right? So in the how does it work category, the we're going to address that at Vail, but before we do that, I'll tell you about an ongoing study that's happening right now at Massachusetts General. So at Harvard, my colleagues there are doing this really interesting study that follows up on some of the immune work we did in our study, really trying to understand, we're going to bring in people with depression. They've actually got one of those fancy machines. We're going to put them in the machine. We're going to heat them 101.3. We're going to draw their blood beforehand and then repeatedly afterwards. And we're going to try to understand, what's it doing? What's it doing physically, right? So that is a really important question. And Harvard, I think, really has taken the lead on that. Another question, and this is something Ashley's been interested in, is, so if one sauna treatment, if one hyperthermia treatment makes me undepressed, it really works for me. Should I do another one, a few days later just to stay undepressed? Would two lock in the response better? Uh, should I wait until I start getting depressed again? We don't know. We don't know. Would the 10th treatment work as well as the first treatment? We don't know in terms of research stuff. The fact that people do sauna over and over again, people vote with their feet. It suggests that it would almost certainly be true. Then we come to Vail. So Vail, Colorado, is a very, very interesting place. Almost everybody in the United States has heard of it. It's one of these places we think of as sort of glamorous and beautiful, and God Almighty, it is beautiful, right? A summer's day in Vail, oh my gosh, But Vail is in a place called Eagle County, Colorado, and Eagle County, Colorado, in 2017 had the highest suicide rate in the United States, and it's not alone. It turns out that ski towns of the Mountain West have the highest suicide rates of anywhere. It's been called a suicide belt. It's been called the Paradise Paradox. And in fact, there's a new movie that's just come out now called the Paradise Paradox. The paradox, of course, is that these places seem like, like who wouldn't want to live in Vail? So people pack up, they go there, they carry all the problems with them. These places, they're very hard to live in. They're very expensive. There's a lot of partying that goes on. The discrepancy between rich and poor is staggering. You got people, you've got a group of people that have houses worth $30 million that they spend 4 weeks a year in. You got some of the largest mobile home parks in the United States, 15 miles away. It's a mess, right? And so, some very, very wealthy, visionary people, including people that have funded our work here in Wisconsin, but who are key to things in the Vail region, made a commitment in 2017 or so to transform how they were doing mental health. And they've raised about $100 million to do that in this county. And they have built out a system of mental health that is astounding. They went from having no resources. So like if you were thinking of killing yourself, 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, they had to put you in jail. They didn't have any place to put you. It was a disaster. Now they're building this beautiful new hospital. They had no providers that took insurance. Now they've got like 120. It's crazy. It's the most amazing thing I ever saw. And they have this vision of equitable, community-based mental health with a strong emphasis on prevention and mind-body practices. And so in the summer of 22, I was asked to go out there to take a look and see what they were doing. And the folks that had really made this possible fund-wise asked me, could we set up a world-class research institute out there? And I said, man, I'm willing to give it my best shot. So,
Mm-hmm.
there's now a consortium that exists between the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I'm a professor, and Vail Health to do a series of studies looking at these novel treatments for mental illness. And we're focusing initially on psychedelics and heat
Mm-hmm.
uh, because they're two of the best things. I've got a lot of expertise in them. So the heat. So we're going to do a study. We're called the CHILLED study. It's an acronym that is going to be a hyperthermia study. And there's a number of questions we could ask ourselves, but the study in Vail is focused primarily on two things. So I said that we don't know, like, how often should we treat people with hyperthermia? Something else we don't know that is of huge clinical importance is whether or not you can benefit as much from heat if you're taking an antidepressant than if you're not.
Okay.
So, I said that we did that first small study in Austria with 16 people,
Mm-hmm.
very small study. Everybody gets hyperthermia. As a group, everybody gets better. But of the 16 people, there were 3 who had been taking a Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, antidepressant like that for long term. They got no benefit whatsoever, right? So everybody, the other 13 people, they all got undepressed. The 3 that were taking an antidepressant, nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have one of my longest, closest friends and collaborators, a guy named Chris Lowry at the University of Colorado Boulder, is one of the other people. He's the basic science guy in our heat network. And he showed years ago that chronic antidepressant use may block the brain effects of hyperthermia. So we got to answer this question because,
Yeah.
if you say to me, Chuck, oh my, I'm so depressed. Can I do this treatment? I've been taking, Zoloft for 5 years. I need to know, do I say to you, listen, Glenn, absolutely, no problem, just do it. Or do I say, here's the deal. The way the brain works, it's a little funny. The fact that you're taking that Zoloft is going to probably make the hyperthermia less effective. So, if you really want to benefit, do we need to help you get off the Zoloft, which is no small feat for people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we got to answer this question. Nobody's ever looked at it.
No.
And yeah, nobody's ever looked at it. So we're going to do this large scale study that's going to have about 100 people in it. And we're going to try to do it so that we enroll half the people on an antidepressant chronically and half the people off an antidepressant. And we're going to just look and see, do we see a signal there? Everybody in the study is going to get the hyperthermia. So, that's the good news here. We'll have a fair number of people. And if the antidepressants disrupt the effect, we will see it. We'll see it, and then we'll know. And we could, if you want, we can circle back to that because it's interesting for a couple of reasons. But the other thing we're doing that I think is also highly novel is asking whether adding cold to heat would enhance the outcome. So, it's a cliche. If I say to most Americans sauna, I think what they see is a bunch of people in Finland, right, running around and rolling around in the snow and then going back in the sauna. And that is a very, very common practice. I mean, many of us. I certainly note that if I do cold after hot, I don't feel as kind of tired afterwards, right? But nobody has ever looked to see, does it does it can you augment the effect of the heat if you expose people to cold?
Mm-hmm.
Now, cold has become a topic of huge interest in the last decade. It's a lot less well studied in terms of its effects on mental health, but people anecdotally swear by it. Wim Hof, the Iceman, his techniques have really gained purchase. They call it Hoffer. There's a Hof club here at UW where they cut a hole in the ice in the wintertime. So we're going to do a study where we randomize people to get either just heat or heat plus cold, and then we'll look and see which one works better for depression. And that's just a very interesting question because if you could really augment the antidepressant effect of heat with something like a cold plunge, it would be worth doing, right? And you could build it into your practice. But having done a cold plunge, it's very different than doing the heat. It's scary. I mean,
I couldn't agree more. I have to interject on that one.
okay.
We, real quick, so we have this going on in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's actually permitted and legal now to cut a hole in one of our city lakes, and you sign a little waiver form and you can cold plunge. And I go over there, I do that. And but in all candor, the only ability, like mentally, for me to like embrace that is my mind goes like, okay, where are my car keys? Oh, I know where they are. Okay, where's my car? I know it's right there. And how do I quickly get back to my backyard wood burning sauna? Because
Uh-huh.
how I'm
Yes.
wired, and I have a lot of respect for people that after sitting in the ice, the hole in the ice. I don't know what they do. They must be thinking about the heater in their car and how to get to work, and warm up that way. But
Oh,
but
I
I'm a
know.
bit of a softie because I do love cold plunge, but I have a sauna to go to.
Yeah, I know. And it's hard, right? I mean, it's a different kettle of fish. We went, the Vail team, we all went down to the clinicians, we went down to Costa Rica this spring to meet. And the guy who runs the program, Chris Lindley out in Vail, he's a former special ops guy. He
Mm.
runs, 100-mile races through the mountains. It's spooky, his physical capacity. But
Right.
he's got a cold plunge in his house, and he does it every day. And so he got us into the cold plunge. And I was literally scared. And it was 49 degrees, which is pretty cold. It's not as cold as your hole in the ice, but it's pretty bad. And I got in it, and it's like you've been punched in the stomach. It knocks your breath out.
Yeah.
But man, it made me instantly euphoric. It was different than the heat, because it was such a, but it did intrigue me because it really, I kind of had this moment of like, what they describe as psychedelics a little bit, this sort of transcendent, like, whoa.
Mhm.
But oh my God, you're right, man. When I got that thing, I was like, wow.
I think to interrupt on that, I think what helps is the group dynamic. You can see people going, and they're like, for me, I have a cold plunge tank in my backyard, and I was out there actually the night before last, practicing some deep breathing and some techniques that were actually taught to me by Wim himself, which I was
Yes.
grateful for and stuff. But I'm doing that, and as challenging as that is alone, I find that if you're in a hole in the ice with like six other people, there's something to that dynamic. Any thought to that?
Yeah, we're actually, without going into the details, because I don't want to totally, there's certain parts of the study we got to keep secret so we don't
Sure,
unblind it.
sure.
But we're going to tap into the group dynamic for just that reason. Yes, absolutely. We noticed that down in Costa Rica, and we're building that into the study. It's especially for first time people. Yeah, you got to pull whatever you can to help people
Yeah.
to make.
Totally.
Yeah,
And like you alluded to before, I mean, this stuff is not new. I mean, we in visiting like about, the monks and the Tumo, I mean, this is not a new thing. I mean, when you think about the Native American sweat lodge experience as a group dynamic, and then some of the military work, which is really fascinating, and the idea of hot and cold for PTSD, and in this group dynamic where there's a journey that's happening together with people with common issues, like in the case of PTSD, is there's a healing power with doing something with like-minded.
absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So, man, I could talk with you for hours, Chuck. And what I was hoping we could do is a follow up. There's so many
Sure.
great foundational points to the, you as really like an early pioneer in this space, in this country. And we can talk maybe next time about some global integration, some global collaboration. That this whole area of studying the heat and the cold is not new, right? We've kind of set that, but how exciting that there is now through the Veil project and your work and your connectivity. We really have some kinetic and potential energy building all at once. I just find it so inspiring. Your work specifically, and the offshoots of people that you are empowering, to advance that. So Are there any other thoughts for right now? I mean, again, and I'm putting you on the spot, but would you be willing to have a follow-up to this chat?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh sure, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We should set up a time in a few weeks. Let's do it again, and let's be. We kind of outline some of the stuff you'd like to talk about, and let's take a look, because I am interested in this idea that there is this emerging network of people, scientists, who are really interested in folks in Switzerland, and folks I don't know. That this pleases me a lot, right? Because when we started this, I didn't know anything about this stuff, and I certainly didn't know other people in the field. And the fact that now there is this sort of coalescing, center of gravity.
Yes.
Looking at these things, it's really important. So absolutely, yeah, we can definitely.
Good.
We can
A
definitely.
couple quick rapid fire personal questions about sauna and you. If you could have a mobile sauna, Chuck, and bring it anywhere in the world, what's the first place to come to mind where you would like to have a sauna?
Oh, that's such a good question. Northern New Mexico.
Okay. And who would you like to be on the bench with in northern New Mexico? Anyone in the world, past, present, living?
Oh, that's really interesting. Past, present, living. I got to think about that one, Glenn. That's really interesting that the geography. I love New Mexico. God, it's really interesting.
Well, you can hold that one for the next sauna.
I'm going to think about that one, because that is a really interesting question.
Good. In New Mexico, we would want to bring a water element in some fashion, right? Like it's pretty dry up there. So, like in this fictitious potential here, like a big truck with a ton of water, I'm sensing, with a cold plunge tank, or is there natural?
No, well, if you go to northern New Mexico, so I would do it outside of Taos, where there actually is a fair amount of running water, right? Because the San Luis Cristo Mountains are really quite verdant, right? So I would do it out in a place called Valle Grande, which is on the other side. It's up in the Jemez Mountains, which is up in the mountains, quite green. But yeah, so what you'd want to do there is you'd want to set the sauna up next to one of these beautiful sort of mountain streams that comes out into the desert. Oh, it's a beautiful.
That's a beautiful intention, and I love that. Last question for you. This is 1.0. This is Dr. Charles Raison on Sauna Talk, the first of at least a 2-part series, which I'd be honored to host part 2. Last question is: what is most misunderstood about sauna in a couple sentences that you think this work can help bring forth?
Yeah. So, I think it's very interesting. Like, if I say the word sauna, people do not go, oh no, that's bad. That's fringe. It doesn't have a bad rap that way. But what it does have is a sense of it being like, oh, that's nice, or like that it's like getting your nails done, right? That it's not a serious intervention. That is the misunderstanding, right? And that's why I like to tell people, if you find that heat makes you feel better, guess what? It is a real biological. Next time we can talk about the biology, because we've done some interesting work.